Finally, finally.
I know after all these years, finally have you
Oh,
on
man.
Talk
Good
is
to see you.
Jericho. It's good to see you, man. And it's been a long time since we did Dancing with the Stars
Yeah,
together.
well, at this level, I did see you, what, about 2 years ago for a bit?
I think
Somewhere in the
last year,
middle of
maybe
camp?
at,
Yeah, yeah,
at the
yeah,
Comic Cons. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But amazing to see just the huge success of the whole Karate Kid franchise. And I was thinking about this, how it's become now like Star Wars or James Bond or any of these long-term Hollywood franchises, and here you are riding the forefront of it yet again some 40 years later.
It's insane. It's, like, I sometimes I use the word stupid because it just I can't even, like, not in a negative way, but it's just like I can't even, fathom the sort of, you know, the uniqueness of it, right? Star Wars is kinda it. What else has kinda done that? Where I in a weird way feel like, the Luke Skywalker of the thing,
Well, yeah.
um, that we had that kind of launch of a little movie that could in the summer of '84 and kinda touched, people's hearts and souls and made you stand up and cheer and then became pop culture and then became parody of pop culture and then became every sitcom or movie reference, and then, it never goes away, and then with Cobra Kai, set it opened it up to a whole new generation, but never losing sight of the comfort food of which it is.
When they first pitched you the idea for Cobra Kai, were you cool with it, or were you like, really? Are we doing this again?
Oh, I
How
think
was that for
really
you?
I definitely wasn't like, "Really, are we doing this again?" Because it was a smart idea.
Yeah.
Previous to that, probably, when we were in Dancing with the Stars and before then, so that was 2011. So I would say like late '90s, 2000s, I would get all the really bad one-off pitches, coming from and not coming from anyone top shelf.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, I'm not saying it was a total gutter pitch, but it was anyone and everyone who said, "This is the idea." You know, my favorite one was always the concept of taking Rocky and the Karate Kid and making them one movie somehow, where Balboa and LaRusso would have 2 troubled kids and meet somewhere between Philly and Newark, and that was pitched to John Avildsen, who directed both of those movies. And ironically, that's kind of the way they make every movie now.
Right.
Take as much IP, collect them together, and but um, but so during that time, yeah, I would get kind of, what if you had a kid and your kid was in trouble and you had to teach him karate? And it's like, and Pat Morita had passed, 2005, I think it was. And, once my partner was gone, it just seemed, that was so
Yeah.
much of the secret sauce of that movie and that franchise was that relationship, right? He was the
Mhm.
the soulful magic that, is the reason why we're still doing it today. But when Cobra Kai came in, to answer your simple question, I sat with those guys and they're like, okay, we want to do a show called Cobra Kai. Now you can imagine what that sounded like to me, playing Daniel LaRusso my whole life on the street at any time I meet someone, including someone like you who would yell out outsiders and Karate Kid quotes in between
That's right. Yeah,
stars. I was doing it for Johnny all the time. But what happened there is that, I was like, okay, Cobra Kai said, and you're gonna be a car salesman, and I'm like, really? And they're like, and we're gonna redeem Johnny Lawrence, and you're gonna be in his face. So then I'm like, okay, okay, okay. I was like, I needed to find where the through line in the arc was. But then it's going to be a two-hander and we're going to follow both of these characters as protagonists. But where it really became interesting is when they started talking about the kids, the
yeah.
young actors, the next generation. Then I was leaning in. Then I liked those storylines of, okay, Johnny Lawrence has an estranged son and he winds up training under my character's tutelage. And I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of cool." So
Right.
now so then it started expanding, started to make sense. And the other the other thing about it, Chris, is that these three guys who created Cobra Kai were the biggest Karate Kid fans I've ever met, and they knew every frame of that franchise, and they cared so much, and that's why that show worked as well as it did. They really cared about it, never lost sight of the themes, the origin of the original film series, yet told relevant stories for kids today and redeemed the ultimate dick of the '80s. And William Zabka delivers just a nothing short of brilliant performance as Johnny Lawrence finding his way and fixing his life.
I think, like you said, the cool part of that was it's much like if you've heard of the show or seen the show Only Murders in the Building, where
Mhm.
it's Steve Martin and Martin Short. But the secret is having Selena Gomez. So you have the old school guys, obviously much older than you, but old school guys. And then you have the whole new element of the teens coming in to watch it. And that's
Yeah.
why Cobra Kai really worked because I could watch it, from a nostalgia standpoint. But then
Yep.
my daughters could watch it because they love seeing kids their own
Yeah.
age doing
Mel
all
and,
these
and
things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It really listen, there were times, there were 3 to almost 4 generations sitting and during the pandemic, Cobra Kai had such a we were like the one new content that was out and at that time, 'cause, so it became must see TV for 3
Right.
generations. And so, you'll have kids that say, "Oh, I wanna be like Hawk," or "I wanna be like, this character. I love this, I like, Samantha, I don't like Tori," or vice versa. And then you have the parents that say, "Wait a second, you gotta see this movie that started this
Yeah.
all." And then they back themselves into it. So now I joke that I have 10-year-old kids running up to me on the street and say, "Hey, don't you play the dad on my favorite show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me. Dad." Yeah.
All right, let me ask you something. How much of your personal info is floating around out there on the internet? Your phone number, your home address, maybe even your family members' names. Stuff's valuable and not in a good way. That's why I use Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are out of control. As someone with a public profile and a podcast that goes around the world, I take my privacy very seriously. I don't want that personal info being sold by data brokers I've never even heard of. And with Delete Me, I don't have to worry. Their team does all the hard work of scrubbing your info from hundreds of data broker websites. You just tell them what to delete and they get to work. So it's not just a one and done thing. They keep monitoring and removing your info 24/7. And every few weeks, you get a personalized report showing what they found and got rid of. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Right now, you can get 20% off your plan. Just text Jericho to 64000. That's Jericho to 64,000 for 20% off. Message and data rates may apply. Jericho to 64000. Protect yourself and your family because no one else is going to do it for you. It's great too, though, because and once again, you sign on for 10 episodes, don't really know what to expect, and then it becomes a massive hit. Because I
Mhm.
remember the first season, my wife and we had to subscribe to like YouTube Premium or something along those
Yes,
lines
it
to
was
watch
YouTube
it.
Red time. You had to plug it into your toaster to get a signal. It's
Yeah,
just
right.
but it was
Eh,
like
eh,
the cool little thing that nobody knew about that was getting, great reviews. It is the low expectations actually helped us, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
'Cause
But
in
I
the
liked it. Go ahead.
No, I was just alluding to that.
I was gonna say too, then it becomes funny because as the seasons go on, it's like this little, the Hill Valley area, but every kid is into karate to where they're all
I know.
like, it almost turns into the Warriors, where every
Yes, yes.
school and every karate
That's
school
great.
has a different
It's so
team.
great. The Warriors is a great I never thought of it that way, but yeah, it was like that. And every little argument, whether, what you were ordering for lunch became like, "Yeah, well, then I'll see you outside and we'll," you know. And yeah, Cobra Kai certainly got really as the seasons went on, it got bigger and bigger and a little interestingly, the guys who write that show were big fans, or certainly one of them, of Karate Kid Part 3, which outside of the wonderful cast and the great crew, I don't find a very good movie by any
Mhm.
stretch. and
Mhm.
but they kind of enjoyed that, how it got Bond villainy like and larger than almost like cartoon animated elements of like the bad guys were really bad, and and so they leaned into that, and in a way, it helped with the longevity of the show. You
What
know,
was it fun for you or interesting to you? Like every, few episodes, a new character comes in who's a grown-up version of, obviously a character
yeah,
from Karate Kid 1, 2, or 3, probably
yeah,
people that you haven't seen in 40 years. And I don't know if they had been acting at all. They're getting these
yeah,
calls to come back into the
yeah.
business.
No, and once the show hit, then everybody was calling like, "Hey, you know what my character would be great at?" But pretty much across the board, everyone knocked it out of the park, came back. I mean, you look at what Yuji Okamoto did with Chosen. First of all, they wrote a great arc. The guy who tried
Mhm.
to kill Daniel LaRusso in Okinawa turns out to be his best friend now,
Right.
you know. And even the Johnny Lawrence, Daniel LaRusso, they are the best versions of themselves now. And when the series ends, you love these two guys together,
Mhm.
despite their warts and bumps. And Elizabeth Shue and Tamlin Tomita, as the Kumiko and Ali, all those characters, the original Cobra guys. I think no one, everyone came in, cared so much. I go back to that again. It's because they cared. They're from the writing
Mhm.
staff down to Billy and I, really protecting these characters, caring. We battle, with the showrunners and the writers who would want to push it to for effect, and they could see the canvas easier than we can.
Mhm.
But I think everyone cared, and they came in and shared. Whether it's a 40 or 35-year journey of what it's been like to be a part of something and wanting to make sure you uphold it in a certain way. And I think that's why, and they just wrote good versions of the adult characters. You got to give a
Mhm.
lot of credit to the writers. You really do. You really do. But yeah, everyone, it was great to see. I mean, even, my God, there was I'm blanking on her name and I feel so bad, but it's this little girl in Karate Kid Part 2 that it helps me at the bell tower during the hurricane, and she comes back and saves my business in season 3 when I'm having this midlife crisis, and we do flashbacks, and they did a good job with the flashbacks. And so it's very
You
different than kind of what Karate Kid Legends is, which is its own ecosystem within the grand universe that is the same universe but a different story, very Star Wars like, where you'll
Sure.
have the Mandalorian, you'll have Rogue One, you'll have the Empire Strikes Back. So it's become that.
Well, it's so cool because we talked earlier about the Rocky Karate Kid pitch of combining the two universes, the multiverse, and it seems with Karate Kid Legends, that's what we have of the Karate Kid multiverse. Because I remember the last one, 2010,
Right,
Karate Kid, and it was with Jaden Smith and with Jackie Chan. But
right.
in this movie, Danny LaRusso meets Jackie Chan's character, but they weren't like it wasn't the same universe originally 15 years ago, but now you're combining the two, it seems.
Yeah, I think honestly, when they made the 2010 remake, it was a remake.
Yeah.
So what they were able to do, and this took more than a couple of meetings to figure out and get me to jump on board. Plus, I was in the middle of Cobra Kai at the time. Um, there's footage, without giving too much away, because the movie is a great deal of fun, and the kid Ben Wong does a beautiful job. He's really winning, and it's very Spider-Man meets Marty McFly in New York karate thing. It has that kind of young Jackie Chan feel to it. This movie, but there's a scene in Karate Kid Part 2 that's very clearly, we use it in Cobra Kai. It talks about that all karate comes from China, and this is the secret. Miyagi's karate comes from this, and it kind of opens the show, and it in a way, we have this footage of young me and the late great Pat Morita explaining that all karate comes from China, and then we venture into how the Mr. Han's family knew the Miyagi family, and they knew each other, and I learn of this. And right there, you either buy the popcorn and go on the ride, or try to dissect
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the frog on the table. If you go along for the ride, it's a great ride. That's kind of, so we figured that out, and for me, it was about the connective tissue and why I, jump into this story and what the kind of paying the legacy forward, and
Mm,
where we find Daniel LaRusso in Legends is about 3 years after the events of Cobra Kai. So Cobra Kai ends with a great finale. If you haven't seen it, you listeners, you should. It's a great series ending. But it ends in a way where Daniel LaRusso is grounded, has found the balance, is the best version of himself, has gotten through that section of his midlife crisis, and now has become a more, confident, seasoned individual, not unlike his mentor, Mr. Miyagi, from when we met. So in a way, it kind of kicks off in that direction, in natural evolution of a guy wanting to help someone who maybe is going through what he did as a teenager. And as we get older, we do that stuff, or at least I do.
mhm.
Whether you take a piece of what you got from your grandfather, your dad, or your teacher that meant something to you, and you see a teenager or a kid, and you have that, you pass on a piece of that. I think there's not enough of that in movies, so I'd like to be a part of kind of sharing that positive stuff going forward.
How is it for you playing Daniel LaRusso again on the big screen? Because obviously Cobra Kai is a big hit, but now you're back,
Yeah, I
on
know.
this.
It was certainly attractive to start this as a major motion picture and then be back on the big screen. I mean, I'm just, I'm literally once I get off with you, I'm getting the suit on and heading over to the premiere. So I'll let you know. I'll let you know. But with an audience and everything else, I think that's I miss cinema the way it used to
Mhm.
be, so anytime you could have a communal experience and have a story touch you on a human level. We're getting further and further away from that with these things. We're all
Right.
living in our phones. So spend 90 minutes, 2 hours, and share something with someone. That's what that's we need more of that.
Well, you've been a working actor for 45 years since you were a teenager. And once again, was there, I mean, we all as entertainers hope for a character like a Daniel LaRusso that can last for so long. Was there ever a point in time when you were like, enough of the like you mentioned, people yelling at you,
Yeah,
do the
yeah, yeah.
crane. Like, did you
Yeah,
get to a
right.
point ever when you're like, I just want to do something else. I want to go
Yeah, I
do
mean,
some Shakespeare.
yeah, for sure, all of that, and some of it I have done. It just hasn't
Yes,
reached the
yes.
global masses, right? Um, Certainly, I would say, what did I mean? Like late '90s, early 2000s. I would never. This is one thing I will say. I would never not talk about it. I'd never one of those actors like, I'll do this talk show, I'll do your podcast, Chris, but we're not
Yeah.
talking about it anymore. That was then, and now I'm doing this. That for me never made any sense. Maybe because what's unique about Daniel LaRusso, that character, that inspirational, aspirational type of character that gives such hope and inspiration to young people, and then parents and adults alike. He was just part of our childhood, right? He was the every kid next door,
Mhm.
kind of had no business winning anything, and at the end of it, he meets this human Yoda and winds up winning with the magic trick of a crane kick. So it became everybody else's character and everybody else's movie. So I always felt saying, I don't want to talk about what you find one of your
Mhm.
favorite things, or something that touched you or that changed your life or made you get past bullying in middle school. That to me is short-sighted to say, to not celebrate that.
Mhm.
Um, so I was always, like say, wise enough to recognize that. But certainly late '90s, early 2000s, I'd want to talk about. I, it would when it would be like, but they want to talk about this. I was I get through it, but it was really the frustrated pigeonholing of things, even leading up into Dancing with the Stars, which was like what 2011, and they'd asked me to do that a few times before then, but it was just what the time was. The remake came out with Jackie Chan, and I was like, I can't just sit here. So I made a video, a funny or die video called "Wax On F Off," And if you're out there and you haven't seen it, it's a lot of fun. I'm sure
It's
Steve,
great. Yeah.
right? It's a little dated now with all the success I've had, but yet it's still kind of relevant in a way. And so when Dancing with the Stars dropped at that point, it was like kind of a way to just show another side of me. And it was exciting and exhausting. And by week 4, I was like, "Is this over yet?" You
Yeah,
remember?
I
It was
do.
tiring, and as an athlete, you get game day. I mean,
Yeah.
you understand, like Heinz Ward, you guys got that. You knew building that week to that, moment.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm not saying it's an advantage, but it's an understanding of how to pace. Whereas a performer, your lights are on, you just go and go and go and go, and all of a sudden your knees and ankles are like, yo, 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 you're not 21 anymore, dude.
Were you
Uh,
surprised at how huge Dancing with the Star was? Because Dancing with the Stars was, especially at that time frame,
it was so huge at that
it
time.
was
I don't think it
massive.
was
Yeah.
bigger. That
Yeah.
that season was like they were drawing 22 million, and then I think The Voice came right at that time, and that sort of split that
Yes.
audience. That's what I believed. But it was a great thing. It really
Mhm.
was a great thing. Um, Tiring and all that. We exchanged the war stories, and but it was, we'll always have it. It's like we did our 1,000 hours in the
Yeah.
military. We could always talk about it. But yeah, before that time, up until that time, I would want to, someone like you who would often, pull outsiders. You're always big with the outsiders, always
Yeah.
pulling quotes from that movie. And, that I'll talk about forever. And I
Wow.
just said something with Francis Ford Coppola, the AFI. He got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I got to participate in that event, black tie event. It was very exciting to be part of that.
Well, let's talk about it since you opened the door, and I wanted to ask you about it. Possibly my favorite movie of all time. I saw it in the theater when I was 12 years old, much like I saw Karate Kid in the theater. And, you're a few years older than me, but I feel like I grew up with you through these characters that you played. It's still amazing to me that The Outsiders, 7 leads in the movie, all 7, and you can even throw Diane Lane in there, all 8 of you became headlining leading men in the movies. What was it like when you first tried out for that film? Because I know it was very early on in your career. Of
Oh,
course, we
yeah.
didn't expect it to be as big as it was, but kind of discuss what was going on in Hollywood with this movie.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's really interesting. I think it's interesting story because Coppola, the great Francis Ford Coppola, Outsiders, Apocalypse Now, all those, uh,
Godfather.
The Godfather, the Rain, what was it? Not, he did the Rainmaker, but before the Conversation, I love
Conversation. Yeah.
Gene Hackman. My God, but so I read that book when I was 12. So your age
The
when you saw that.
Outsiders. Yeah.
I read
Yeah.
that book, and it was the first book I ever finished without my parents saying, "You can't go out and play till you're done reading that chapter." Right? I was not the best student. I was a daydreamer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
be on stage and like Gene Kelly or in a movie. So somehow I got super lucky. So I read that book. I connected to all the characters. I mean, amazing. S.E. Hinton wrote that book when she was in school as a
Yeah.
16-year-old girl in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's still here. She's in Tulsa, and
Hmm.
it's great. It's great. And then I connected with the Johnny Cade character, not based on he was described physically just like me, kind of the runt of the litter, dark hair, puppy dog eyes. I
Yeah.
was, I wasn't as introverted as he was, but I was certainly, felt a little going through puberty. I was always behind, everybody else, all the other guys were faster, stronger, cooler. So I kind of got that sensibility with him. So when it came time for that movie, when I heard they were making a movie of it, it was initially going to be, I think it was Martha Coolidge. I forget the female director that was slotted to direct it through Coppola's company. Um, and I auditioned for Fred Roos. He recently passed away. He cast American Graffiti, The Godfather, The
Mm.
Outsiders. Just talk about the ensemble, greatest
Yeah.
casting director ever. He, I came and I read for him, and the feedback was really strong. But Just I needed to go deeper with certain stuff, and I threw myself into acting classes at that time. I just finished a run on Eight Is Enough. I was on that
Right.
TV show on
Yeah.
ABC. My joke is I was nine was too many, and that was the end of that. Right? So I put myself into acting classes, and did scene study of scenes from the book. And then
Mm,
it came back around, um, uh, Kismet, I guess, or whatever, came back around and Coppola was going to direct it. So then it was like, holy crap, the Godfather of cinema is going to direct my favorite book, and I
mm.
want to play this part. And so I got the audition, and it was an ensemble type of audition. At that time, you can see footage of this stuff on
Yeah.
YouTube behind scenes where you have Diane Lane, Dennis Quaid, Mickey Rourke, Matt Dillon, Scott Baio, myself, whatever, just interacting, doing different scenes, Coppola, like almost like a theater class. But it was arduous and painful because you're watching everyone else and then you're looking for the whether Coppola is leaning in or if he's getting
Mhm.
bored. And, so it's really, he found it a place to just, create the chemistry. We found it a place, it was torture. But
Terrifying. Yeah.
I kept saying, my audition, you could see a little piece of it. I remember him saying, okay, I want you to read Two Bit Now, and you read Dallas, and you read Soda Pop. And I was like, but I just want Johnny's the only, I just want to be this part. I was that defiant. And he said, it's fine. He said, I understand, but everyone's reading different things. And it took a long time. A lot of guys were then flown to New York. This was out in LA. A lot of guys, and I was in LA at the time. A lot of guys were flown to New York to meet to work with the Matt Dillons of the world, the New York casting, and I wasn't brought. So I thought I was out,
Oh
and
man.
and then I found out later the only reason I didn't go to New York is they decided they were, that I was the guy, and I still say to this day to Francis, you could have called,
Right. They
but he
never
didn't
tell you anything.
didn't want to. I think all the once he had the cast, then he had everyone called at the same time.
It's
It's a
amazing that
really
it's
cool story.
amazing you auditioned for Johnny, you wanted Johnny, and you got him. That's very rare.
I know that early on in a workshop that they did before Francis was directing it, they did a workshop of it, and I know that Robert Downey Jr. played Johnny for a while in that workshop. So I tease him anytime I run into him. I said, "I'll give you one Johnny for
Yeah, an
one Iron."
Iron Man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah. So when you start filming the movie, I mean, obviously, and it's funny because a friend of mine, you probably know Danny Boy O'Connor, who's from
Oh
House of
yeah,
Pain. Jump,
yeah.
he owns the Outsider's
He
house,
bought he bought
which
the Curtis Brothers house, and
he
it's a great museum to go to. It's
it's
awesome.
amazing. He bought it for 15 grand, and I was like, damn, if I would have known, I would have bid
Yeah.
20.
Oh,
But
right, right.
you start filming the movie, and basically the first hour is Pony Boy and Johnny, their adventures and killing Bob and going to Windrixville and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, you know it, man. It's so
Dude,
great.
I know it back in
Yeah,
my hand. But once again, I showed my kids a couple movies when they were growing up. Karate Kid was one, Outsiders is another, resonates to this day, still
yeah.
holds up. Doesn't matter what generation it is. Tell us about the filming, what you remember of it.
Yeah, that was, we were in Tulsa. We shot it right on the streets of where she wrote about.
Yeah.
Um, we started shooting nights first. The first scene we shot was at the drive-in movie where, you know, um, Matt's like, "You a real redhead?" That's the same,
Yeah.
with Diane
Be
and
real.
yeah, yeah. Is that the same hair that you have on your eyebrows? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
little, Matt doing Matt and his Dallas Winston, and it was freezing. It was just so cold. Francis also had these big Ritters. They were the big 6-foot Ritter fans. He wanted the environment to be turbulent all the time. There's always wind blowing. If you watch that film, that we're always in the
Mm.
wind. And so it was. I remember we were darn cold, and we had about 2 weeks of rehearsal. The
Oh,
coolest thing
wow.
is Francis had all the socias with leather-bound scripts and the higher hotel room floors with for
Oh,
all I know,
wow.
limited room service. We had like the scripts were held together with like a loose leaf ring, and we had all the lower floors, and we went to location in like a community van he did this like the first few days to just create the separation of societal
Mhm.
differences, you know? So it was acting camp. It was, and we
Mm.
did memory and improvisations, and it was awesome. And you so often don't get to do that in movies today
Yeah.
for the most part. I guess there are some that still do that, but everyone's you run in, you do your thing, you go, and that was it was really a community that Francis created. And so but there was a section of that movie that was really just me and C. Thomas Howell alone, and we got on each other's nerves just like any two guys that we were
Yeah.
separated about 6 years. I'm a little older than he is.
Mhm.
Still. And we laugh about it. We just, like I said, we presented something to Francis at the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award for his brilliant cinematic work over the years, and me and Ponyboy and Johnny got to come out and do a little shtick for Francis. It was really cool.
But it's interesting too because much like if Million Dollar Baby or something, if you've seen that Clint Eastwood movie,
Oh
the
yeah,
story is
yeah,
it's such a great story as is The Outsiders. If you hadn't read the book, which I had, as you had, takes a complete right turn after the fire and
yep,
Johnny's injured. This is some pretty deep acting for
yep,
you
yep,
at such a young age. I mean, I don't know how old you were, 20, early
yep.
20s.
Yeah, I was just turned 19, turned 20.
I mean,
But
that's deep.
yeah, that stuff was the thing I learned the most from Francis, and that for me is, he even gave me this note in my audition. He was saying, try to mine the humor out of these situations. Like, don't lean into the poor me or the drama or the broken family, which is probably what I was doing as a young actor. Because you feel it, you read it on the page, and then you want to make sure everyone's picking that up. He would always, often with me, say, think about the best day you ever had with your dad, and just
Mhm.
have that in your head when you start this. And the scene had nothing to do with a good day with your dad. He just wanted to get me out of that, leaning into I guess maybe the safe choice or the on the page choice, and find other things, and also strip away the acting. And the more I did that, and the more off balance I was, the truer, the further I went. And I think, I'm really proud of that performance, for myself, out of the gate at that stage in my career. It's still one of my favorites to this day.
Yeah, I mean, you're paralyzed, you're burned, you're dying, and it's still, it's such a great, it's a very mature performance for such a young man at the
Yeah, I
time.
listen. It's a, he holds a special place, Johnny Cade, to me. Always. And I'll run into, we talk about running into young kids with Karate Kid. I run into teenage girls that have the book, and they're literally tears running down their face, or guys, and I sign Stay Gold, and I mean, everybody does, but I always say I take
Mhm.
pride in the fact that I got to say the line. Um,
That's right.
and they scream and cry, and they just love those characters. And it's on Broadway as a musical,
Yeah.
reimagined, won the Tony Award, and it's fantastic. It's different, but it feels, it's another one that I've been lucky enough to be involved with, that is still giving back to generations. Amazing.
It's so amazing too because it wasn't a huge hit at the time, but
No, nope.
it didn't really pop, did it?
No, it had mixed reviews. The critics, it really was split. I mean, I remember excellent reviews for The Outsiders, and I remember others that were just tore it apart. And um, I think they were gunning after Francis, which he's always had that, which is why
Mhm.
he's a great artist. Even when he fails, it's glorious because it's on his terms.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but when you look at that cast, all of a sudden. Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing, the launching pad that was.
Do you have sort of a camaraderie or a connection with those? I mean, Patrick obviously passed away, but with the other guys, is there kind of an
There's a
unwritten
there's a
thing between you
kindred
guys?
spirit. You're exactly
Yeah.
right. you get it, man. It's just something about The Outsiders, whether it's Rob Lowe or C. Thomas Howell, or C. Matt Dillon. He just texted me the other day when he saw the thing I did with Francis. He couldn't be there, and I hadn't heard from him in a couple of years. And when he hit me with a text just saying how proud he was to see us up there, and it was like yesterday. It's like seeing you know someone you did, like I say, you did your 1,000 hours. You did, you have a there's I mean, because we all kind of started there,
Mhm.
and and I saw Diane Lane at the event AFI, and it was just, she just looked great and was just such a, you know, fan of the work she's done over these years. You just look into each other's eyes and you
Mhm.
see life has gone by. You see 40 years have gone by, but in there you see the window of that of the youth is wasted on the young, right? So now you recognize that. And we were young back then, and we all had a a great journey to this point, and we ain't done yet. It's pretty grateful to have all that.
It's so funny. Here we are talking with Mission Impossible, just did a box office record for
Yep.
Memorial Day. Same thing with Tom Cruise, another
Yep.
guy. He probably had the smallest role out of the 7 you, and
Yeah.
here he is, one of the all-time
Yep.
billion-dollar guys.
Yeah, no, and almost single-handedly saving movies
Yeah.
post-pandemic. I mean, it's really a credit to him. And he was that you saw that version
Mhm.
of him. You saw that, yeah, I wouldn't even say seed. He was driven back then. I mean, you saw he had a plan. He took that part of Steve Randall in The Outsiders, who's Soda
Mhm.
Pop's friend. I mean,
Yeah.
really, you go break down the tree of where that character fell, and he made it. He made it a character, and was did the thing with his took the cap off his front teeth. He wanted that to have
Yeah,
that broken
right.
tooth. We were all doing stuff like that because we were working for Coppola, so we were all trying to one up whether it was Swayze. I mean, it was like the push-up competitions. I would bow out of those, but there was that the competitiveness, but so would there be with guys of that age at that time. And we were in, the movie that everybody wanted to be in,
Mm,
so there was a lot of that, there was a lot of that, but it was awesome. It's so great to reminisce with you about this stuff.
yeah.
It's
No,
cool.
it really it's as we start to wind down, there's still a few things I wanna ask you about.
Yeah.
Uh, let's talk about My Cousin Vinny. At the
Yeah.
time when it came out, it's out of nowhere, here's Ralph Macchio again, appearing on the big screen. It seemed like it was kind of a resurgence for you, putting you back kind of in a real mainstream film. Once again, did you expect this one was gonna be what it was? Because you were a major part of that movie as well.
Yeah, I knew Joe and Marissa had something special. You could see that, they really Marissa was just you knew that was a star making performance.
Yeah.
And it was she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She was incredible. And Joe I had known because I was on Broadway in a play called Kubener's Teddy Bear with Robert De Niro in '86, and Joe would come on occasion. And I got to know him a little bit. But My Cousin Vinny was a tough role for me to get because I kind of was falling off the
Mm,
list
right.
at that time. Um, as the story goes, Ben Stiller and Will Smith were on the list, and they actually came into audition. I actually read with
Wow.
Will Smith as it would just change. It would totally change that movie. But it's just kind of you go back, you tell these. I'm telling old Hollywood stories. I feel like Eli
Yeah.
Wallach, Friars Club, but but you know what I mean. It's like that generation's version. But Vinny was, um, you know, it's one of the funniest American comedies. It really is a great script by Dale Lorner. He wrote. Ruthless People was one of his movies with Danny DeVito back then, but
Mm.
it's I call it the late for dinner movie because when it's on, you're gonna be late for dinner because you just have to stay to watch every setup get paid off because it's just a kind of perfect American comedy, and I had a lot of time where I was just sitting behind the defendant's table, but watching the magic happen. Fred Gwynn, an awesome his last
Amazing.
performance.
Wow.
it's a funny one, and yeah, between those three, Outsiders, Karate Kid, and Vinny, when you think of that small window of time for me, that's 83 to 92. Um, it's crazy to have three movies that's
Mhm.
that are dated, but they're not.
They still,
They
yeah,
still
they
pay
still
off. And
resonate.
they're on television at some point. So it's pretty
Did
cool.
did did your performance as Johnny lead to you getting, an audition for Karate Kid? 'Cause I'm sure that's another
I'm
movie
sure it
that
didn't
everybody
hurt.
in town wanted. Yeah.
I'm sure it didn't hurt, but they were searching. I mean, I met John Avildsen. I'm in New York City now. I mean, about 50 blocks up from here. I remember walking into his apartment. uh, the character's name was Danny Weber, and it had this ridiculous title called The Karate Kid. I said, this thing's got the worst title in the world. And maybe for the foreshadowing is I might have known I'd be carrying for the rest of my life, right? But and I walked in his apartment. I saw his Academy Award there and his picture of the poster for Rocky. And once again, and like I mentioned, Coppola and him, I got to work with some great,
Jeez,
great
yeah.
filmmakers, at a young age. And I was, my audition for the Karate Kid, you could see on YouTube. It's there intercut
Mm,
with Pat Morita's first reading. And it's really kind of incredible when I look at it because it's kind of just a version of what's on the big screen. I was just the right guy at the
mm,
right time for that role, and then Pat Morita was, everyone just concerned he was Arnold on Happy Days. How is he ever going to play his character? And the producer didn't even want to see him, and that
really?
those are the great stories. Jerry Weintraub said, "There's no way that guy's going to be in my picture."
Wow.
Well, he remember he's a Catskill comic. He's not right. When they wanted Toshiro Mifune, they wanted like an Akira Kurosawa classic Japanese actor. The problem is he didn't speak English, and and uh, and there was humor in that role. Well, I mean, obviously, history tells Pat Morita was
Mhm.
Miyagi and vice versa, and Karate Kid Legends is coming out, May 30th because of Pat Morita back in 1983. Because without that and that partnership, where Cobra Kai and
Yeah,
Legends and all this stuff, it's the origins that created the magic. So I always, it's like any form of history. I like sharing that. Like I say, paying the
sure.
legacy forward. That's why I continue, because it's good, positive messaging, right? Mentorship, dealing with loss. In my case, that character, loss of his father. In the case of the new movie, the kid is a loss of his brother, dealing with that. Fish out of water, kid in a new town, facing bullies, when to fight, when not to fight, when to be the best version of yourself. I think, that those are good themes for any generation.
Well, absolutely, and it's called legacy, and there's such a legacy. We talked about seeing each other at the comic convention, the Comic Con, which is such a thing. You had I always have good lines, okay? Your line was like crazy, and it was the whole week or a day, 2 days, 3
Yeah.
days. I mean, the people coming to see the whole Cobra Kai cast, but
Yeah.
obviously with Ralph kind of at the head. Does
Yeah.
that amaze you just how many people, relate to this character and want a picture and an autograph and to say hi?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I do not take it for granted. To me, it's a two-way street of inspiration. That's how I look at it. It
Mhm.
really is. I get as much I mean, the Comic Cons, they're exhausting, and it
Yes,
is,
yes.
you have to have a certain mindset because not every interaction is as good as the last. You know what I mean? So people generally are excited, and when you look at nothing's more than the Daniel LaRusso, the Karate Kid character, because you have multiple generations. You have grandparents bringing their grandchildren and parents that went on their first date to see
Yeah,
that movie. They remember where they were, what popcorn they ordered. It's one of those types of experiences, and then you add to that, The Outsiders being a book that's still read in many schools, and it's on Broadway now. It's every that stuff is relevant, and then Cobra Kai on top of that, as being topical. it's pop culture. You know,
Yeah.
I I joke that I stepped in shit and it smells like petunias, but I give
Last 2
myself more credit than that. Well, I'll give myself more credit than that. But you know what? You gotta make your own luck, and it's always a part of it.
last 2 questions for you, Ralph.
You got it,
All
brother.
the great roles that you've done, we've talked about 3 of them, we could talk about 20 more. Is there a role that stands out for you as the favorite one that you've done that's not Karate Kid or Johnny Cade?
Well, I would give it to Johnny Cade always, but then I would that was and then LaRusso's a close second. I mean, I'd
Yeah, yeah,
be
yeah.
that lying not to say that. But the character I played on Broadway with De Niro, Cuban as Teddy Bear, really a great character. We almost there was discussions of doing a movie of that back then. Um,
Mhm.
and I also, you know, it was fun. I did a role in a show called The Deuce on HBO. It was Maggie Gyllenhaal, James Franco, and a whole bunch of great actors. David Simon, who did The Wire and all these really gritty HBO shows. And I played a really crooked vice cop, and it was just fun to delve into that area, like a what you think is a family man on the outside, but really he was only in it for selfish reasons, and would take money under the table, you know, in a not very good way, as the cops in the 70s did in New York. And so that was kind of, I'd love to expand those psyches of really not an evil person, but
Yeah.
someone, let those flaws come up to the surface a little bit more, because we have them. We all have versions of them. That was kind of fun.
What's your favorite scene in The Outsiders?
Oh wow, that's a good one. Um, there are two. Um, um, I think after he kills Bob, and
Mhm.
it's 360 camera angle, and there was just that moment we were freezing to death that night. But there was I really believed I there was a moment in that scene where I stepped out of myself. I was so engrossed in the scene that when we got done, I was still fearful and scared of what those repercussions would be. Like I kind of in the moment, it had happened. I had done it. What this how do you even fathom that defensive thing where he kills someone,
Mhm.
and where does he go in his life? And I got scared, and I was very scared, and I didn't sleep that whole next
Wow.
day. I was just shaken by the that experience. And then also when Ponyboy reads the letter at the end, that I
Mhm.
credit Francis. I think that's one of the more pure, honest, genuine pieces of acting I've ever done, when I was just talking about,
Mm.
you know, what stay gold means, what Robert Frost meant, and there's still lots of good in the world. Tell Dally, I don't think he knows. It's just
Yeah.
pure, pure innocence. And I give credit to Francis, because I went into that scene once again, like I alluded to earlier, performing it a little bit, and he just worked with me on stripping it down. And when I watch that scene, it's as honest a scene as one of the most honest scenes I've ever played, at least in that movie.
"Leave her alone, Dally." Would you say? Would you say to
Yeah,
me, "Leave her
yeah,
alone.
you little squirt
Get
that
out of
inside.
here, you little shit."
That's right. Yeah, you would have been. You know, you should do the remake.
Ralph, it's great talking to you, man,
It's
and I'm
great.
glad we got to
Yes, thanks so
reconnect.
much, man.
And congratulations on everything, and enjoy it. Big premiere tonight. You're old school Hollywood now.
That's
You're the
right.
new Eli Wallach of your
Oh
generation.
my god, yeah, that's pretty funny. I pull out all the relevant new names, but, it's cool. Listen, you've been so every time we're together, it's all positive, and I root for you, and so happy with all you're doing, and it's once again another two-way street of inspiration, so I appreciate the support, brother.
Thanks, man. Congratulations. We'll talk to you soon.